Slip Oz gets set up. Yep, no problem. And Slip Oz, if you can link me your armory as well from your Paladin, if it's sort of up to date, that would be beneficial as well. Okay, where am I going? What is the quickest way to... I guess I could go to Orgrimmar, right? Yeah, I guess I'll go to Orgrimmar. There. Sparta, do you have one big macro for your main healing cooldowns, or do you click them one by one? I don't click them. I have most of our macros for all my abilities. So for my Holy Radiance, my Flash of Light, my Holy Shocks, they're all specific macros. Right here, there's my Word of Glory or Eternal Flame. Light of Dawn doesn't need one because it's an AoE Smart Heal. Okay, here we go, we're flying. What item level is my Horde character? He is 531. My US Horde character, he's like 541. I'm flying Orgrimmar. Relax yourselves. I mean, I'm flying from Orgrimmar. Like Wings and Guardian? No, I don't use them all at once. I use them for, like, I use them split up unless I need to, you know, use them at all at the same time. So my Holy Avenger Shift R, that was the macro I was trying to use when I was hitting my my taunt. My Divine Favor, which I often use with my Holy Radiant, my Holy Avenger. Sorry, Divine Favor with Holy Avenger, because they're both on 2-minute cooldowns. I'll usually use those in conjunction with each other, and then I have Avenging Wrath as Alt W, Divine Favor is Alt Q, and Garden of Ancient Kings is Alt E. So they're all very similar to each other. Yeah, Shuttle, I'm going to do another interview, and welcome back. That was quick. Shuttle went off to see what Game of Thrones with his girlfriend. Yeah, we're going to do a bit of a Holy Paladin interview as well, Shuttle. So you missed your chance. This guy hasn't played a Holy Paladin since the beginning of Siege of Orgrimmar, but he's still sort of up to date on most theory crafting. And the first interview we had, the tank one, was fantastic. It was a really, really great interview. We're just letting him get his stuff set up. And we're flying down. We'll switch over to potential EU Alliance for a quick run, and then back to some other transmog runs too. Oh, you skipped dinner? You went straight to Game of Thrones? Nerd. That's okay. We can make fun of you. In other news, somebody that doesn't like me in Warcraft said they would beat me up at BlizzCon. This guy with his other Ashbringer on Stormrage doesn't like me because I give them away for free and I'm ruining his business, and he's going to beat me up at BlizzCon. I think like he's 15 or something. So
sounds like you need an adult.
Sounds like I'm going to need, you know, a whole posse of other 15-year-olds to protect me. Yeah, like if you have an oh shit macro, like for some things, you know, if I'm not paying attention, I'll use my oh shit macro, just hit everything at once. But I mean, the macros are pretty close. Like it's Alt Q W E, so I have to hold down Alt with my thumb and either hit Q W E for one set of cooldowns or Shift R with the other one, and they're pretty close to each other, so it's not a huge deal. Is that the guy that got banned? Apparently, same guy. Same guy.
Hey.
Hey, Slipos. Can you guys hear him okay? Let me know if the volume is okay for him.
Just before we go, like I said, I'm spec for tank and everything right now, so, like I got a Heroic Warforged headpiece for my healing set yesterday. I just have to gem it real quick so that I can show you a fairly up-to-date armory.
Sounds good, no worries. We'll start it in a sec here. Hey there, Tommy Mac. You guys can't hear him? Yeah, that's what I thought it was. Can you turn it up at all? your either microphone settings or your volume.
Yeah, 1 second.
Let me try to turn my settings up on OBS as well. Try talking again. I increased the sound settings a little bit.
Is that better for the stream?
That's that was a little bit better. Where'd you go?
I was sitting on the swing, drinking a cider. What? I'd love to sit on the swing and drink a cider.
Sparty, medical personal trainer here. Want me to come along to make sure everything goes fine? I'm sure it'll be fine, Adarinia. Okay, so that should have been better. Okay. So again, thanks a lot for doing this with me. Shuttle was not around, neither were the other Holy Paladins. So yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll try to be as concise, and I'll grill you like I grilled. I would grill another Holy Paladin. That would expect to know what they're talking about. So we'll do the same sort of thing we did with Noise Marine. I'll have a lot of general questions for you. For those of you that weren't there earlier, I'll have general questions for him that are more guild specific, and then I'll have Paladin related questions for him as well. So tell me about your previous guilds. Tell me a little bit about them and what happened to them, why you left them, or why they fell apart.
Alright, so I will start. I've been playing since late Burning Crusade, and I always wanted to raid, but I never had the computer for it. I was playing on a very bad Mac. I think it was like a 1999 MacBook Pro or MacBook, just regular MacBook, and it had like 2 gigs of RAM. Could hardly play the game. At the end of Kata, right before LFR was introduced, I got a new computer which could run the game at max settings at like 120 FPS, which was a humongous increase from what I had. So I got right in, and I was playing a Ret/Holy Paladin at the time, and at the beginning of MOP, I decided I wanted to go for raiding, and it's what I always wanted to. So at that point, I joined a friends guild on the server that I was on, and we started MSV progression. We didn't get very far. I quickly learned that the other members of the guild were not the best players. I don't like to rag on previous members because they were my friends, but not all of your friends are always going to be the best players.
This is true.
At that point, I decided that I did want to move on, so I transferred, and I actually joined Preach's US guild to raid actually as a Resto Druid. We cleared normal mode TOT as me raiding as a Resto Druid and a Warlock, and then for Siege of Orgrimmar, I switched to Holy Paladin because that's what the raid group needed at the time. Around this time, we were having some leadership issues with specific people leaving the game or transferring off of the server, at which time I assumed the role of raid leader, and I continued healing on my Holy Paladin, and we were able to clear normal mode within a couple of weeks, and then we started heroic progression, I would say late 2013, and by February, late February, we were 6 out of 14 heroic, so not too cutting edge by any means, but there was a lot of improvement on my end and on my team's end from when I actually did begin to raid, considering Mr. Pandara was technically my first expansion as a raider.
And what would you attribute a lot of that improvement to?
Well, firstly, the ability to play the game, having a computer that can actually run the game, and not just at a very high level with graphics and such, but just being able to see your environment, be able to play smoothly without FPS lags as it was before, but also that it's something that I really did want, and that I took a lot of time to research, to do my own personal theory
Good.
crafting
That's a
around
good
the
answer.
specific class that I would be playing, as well as asking around not only the server, but trying to get some more in-depth knowledge from other people who were playing my class at a much higher level than I was.
Good answer there. Yeah, that was a great answer. Sorry, give me 1 sec.
No problem.
You interrupting my mock interviews? Ow!
Oh, did I stab you a little bit?
With your stupid
Sorry,
earring.
come here.
Ow! That was my eyeball where your stupid earring went. Okay, yeah, that was a great answer. Overall, good. What is this shit? Sparty, I have a 2-person man. I'll carry you. Screw you, dickholes. Okay, and now typically I would go through more of a general question as well. Like where, I'm not going to get into specifics here, but how public of a person are you generally? Whether that be realm forums or public chats, trade chat, general chat, things like that. How much do you participate in those?
I would say that I am typically, because of my position in the guild, as the raid leader, and I am also technically the recruitment officer of my guild, I am required to be somewhat of a public figure, because I am the one that does all of the recruiting for the guild up to now. So I am the one that posts and trade. I update a website. I am the one that has to post things in the WoW forums, on MMO Champion, anything that I can do to try and get our guild out there to be known, so that we can try and recruit, because we are trying to get ready for WOD. And
Quad.
so for that reason, I would say that I am somewhat of a public. I do participate in trade, not as a person that communicates through that, but however, posting a macro, trying to get people to whisper me to apply to go to the website. So for that reason, I would say I am fairly involved in the public of WoW as a whole. However, I don't appreciate the people that use trade for anal jokes, linking anal achievements and Thunder Fury and stuff like that. And I have friends that do that, or had friends that do that, and it always just bugged me, because more often than not, those devices are there for people to use, such as the WoW forums or Reddit or trade tool for people that need to make pugs or recruit. So I try to stay away from people that troll, for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
and I
perfect.
do not troll myself.
Yeah, that was actually exactly what I was looking for. So we're a very private guild as well. I've always been under the philosophy that your guild tag represents who you are, and if you have one person that's an idiot, well, people will look, that guild's full of idiots, because it is like a uniform. Now, with your answer, you said, yeah, because I'm a raid leader, I have to be that public figure. That being said, you don't use it for the general ass hattery that is general in trade chat, the Thunder Furies, the anal jokes, all that stuff, which is good. Had you said, yeah, I joke around there all the time, and trade chat's a really fun place to be around, and it's hilarious, and all that other stuff, that would be a bit of a red flag for me. But yeah, that was a fantastic answer. Can people have fun in trade? Yeah, they can.
No, they can't.
But is it, is that person right for my guild? I'm not so sure. There is plenty other ways to have fun in the game, but someone that just likes to spam anal jokes because they have the maturity of a 13-year-old may not have the maturity for heroic rating. May not. They could, but who knows? Now, with my next questions, they'll be a little bit more raid-based. In your raiding experience thus far, what have you found to be the most difficult encounter for yourself to learn? And so your true content is really Miss of Pandaria onwards, when you got your new computer and stuff.
Well, as far as this was also my first expansion being a raid leader, so there was at the beginning of when I first took up raid leading, there was a little bit of a struggle trying to learn how to focus on healing, because it is a 10-man group, so we only have 2 healers for normal stuff. For heroic progression, we may be using 3 depending on the fight. But there is a little bit of a learning curve at first, as far as trying to figure out when it's okay to be paying attention to not just okay, this player is taking damage, but why is that player taking damage? Do I need to say something? Do I need to tell people to stop being stupid? Do I need to call for a cooldown? Etc. etc. So for that, going into heroic progression as a new raid leader, I would say that a lot of the fights were fairly difficult just because I was having to try and master 2 aspects of progressing through heroic content that I had never done before, as well as trying to raid lead. As far as a specific fight is concerned, I would say that around the time that we were doing Malkarok normal, so not heroic, I was using a very high mastery build. So at first when I went in there, I did know about the shield mechanic, I did know how it worked, and I was aware that my mastery build was not going to be as useful to the raid. So when I first went in there, I did change my build to more of a haste intellect spirit build. I didn't really know what to do. I had tried talking to some people, but I wasn't able to get a very clear answer at the beginning. So as I went through that, I had to kind of discover through my own experience and from what I was being told from other people, what was the actual best way not only to heal that fight, because as you know, absorbs are they're not useful at all in that fight for the most part. So I was having to learn that fight in and out as a holy paladin coming from a mastery build. So from that standpoint, I would say that Malkarok was a very difficult fight to learn at first, but after I got the hang of it, it basically became second nature. Just, okay, switch gems and enchants there.
Yeah, and this is on 10-man Malkarok, right?
Yeah, this is on 10-man.
And did you opt for a haste or crit build? And I'm assuming you're running Eternal Flame as well?
Yes, for 10-man I would be running Eternal Flame. We run a... the other healer is a Resto Druid in the group, so we were blessed to have a Resto Druid for Malkarok. So at the time, I did go with a haste build, purely because I would talk with another Holy Paladin on the server that was also going through some of the same problems that I was having as far as what to do for this particular fight, and he had found that in his experience of downing the boss, that haste worked better for him just because he was able to get more casts off in a particular amount of time and rebuff the shields faster. Also, I will say that as far as crit, I had 0 crit on my gear already, and the amount of other stats that would have to lose in order to go for a very heavy crit build would have been detrimental to the gameplay, because I wouldn't have been able to meet my specific haste breakpoints that I was going for at the time,
Have you let your
and
tea steep
stuff like that.
Well, there was nothing for me to put the tea bag into. Awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, Malkarok is a really shitty fight for Holy Paladins. In 10-man, a little bit less so. In 25-man, it's terrible, and it's definitely our worst fight by far. So him giving me the reasoning of why he was struggling at both as a raid leader and then as a Holy Paladin, and he gave good reasons why, because, mastery is our main component as a Holy Paladin, and with him going, it just does not work well on something like Malkarok. He'd have to pump out more heals in a 10-man. He definitely wants to lower his global cooldowns more and get more holy power, more Eternal Flames, top off everybody like a druid would. But that was great. Now, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but where do you do most of your class research or theory crafting?
So, as a player, I have kind of flip-flopped between a bunch of different classes. So, some tunes that I've rated on this expansion are a Boomkin, a Resto Druid, a Warlock, a Holy Paladin, Protection Paladin. Sorry if I'm going a little fast. And I tried rating on a Mage for a little bit. So for each of those classes that I just mentioned, I'd always try and find resources that were from not only just a computer-generated source, such as Ask Mr. Robot, but I would also find resources from players who were doing hard mode content and get a bunch of different ones, so I could kind of cross-reference between them. For Holy Paladin specifically, I would use armories to try and help me learn what stats I should be using. So, for example, I would use your armory. I would look at what were you gemming for, what were you reforging to, because there is a difference between what you reforge to and what you gem for.
Mm-hmm.
You can get more stats of one depending on what you're going for. You have to choose what to go for, basically. I also will use forums on the MMO Champion. On MMO Champion, there are a bunch of Holy Paladin forums as far as haste breakpoints are concerned. How many ticks of Eternal Flame are you going to get when you go for a higher haste breakpoint? Why would it be beneficial? And then if there are a bunch of posts underneath them, I would usually then go and try and find another source, whether it be a website, which I would not use religiously, but a website like Paladiner. It has some very specific information as far as what a Holy Paladin should be looking for to begin healing on a Holy Paladin. And so I would cross-reference what I find on forums and talking to other players. One of my very good friends on the server is a Holy Paladin and I believe they're 11 out of 14 heroic now. I would talk to him about what he was doing for a fight. He is also actually not good friends, but he does get in contact with Shuttle from Blood Legion, who was previously in Whatever Awesome from the realm I am currently on now. So I was very lucky to have actually a couple of Holy Paladins that I could talk to as far as min-maxing specific stats for specific fights and stuff along those lines.
Okay, fantastic. And yeah, I mean, so you listed a number of resources there that you use. You talked about other paladins that are, a little bit more progressed than you, people that have way more theory crafting done. You listed the MMO champion. One thing that I may follow up with, well, who do you sort of pay attention to the most on MMO champion? Which of the theory crafters? And there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of really good ones that throw down really amazing spreadsheets. And he talked about the haste breakpoints and things like that. So just by those answers alone, I know that I could skip a lot of the really basic questions, such as, what are the 2 haste breakpoints that you would follow as Eternal Flame?
Right off the bat, for Eternal Flame, it is 3575, I believe, off the top of my head.
A little close.
I've been
3506.
Okay, 3506, and then the other one, hold on, I have this written down because I write everything down as far as that is concerned. For the other one,
it's okay, it's not a huge deal. Like, I know you haven't played
17, yeah, 7,170 for this.
Yeah, and that's correct. Yeah, 7170 is the second haste breakpoint. But I know you haven't, played a Paladin a little bit, so. But no, that's good. Yeah, fantastic. So he knows his stuff. I can skip a lot of the really basic questions. What's your Holy Paladin, priority? Which he would say it depends if he's Selfless Healer or Eternal Flame. And I could ask him, do you have any experience with running Selfless Healer over Eternal Flame?
The only time that I've attempted to do Selfless Healer in a 10-man setting
was
on Thok, just because we were trying to pass the mechanic and try and stay in phase 1 as long as possible. But typically for 10-man stuff, I don't run a Selfless Healer, and I do run Eternal Flame just because it is better for pretty much every fight in Siege of Orgrimmar. I cannot say at the moment right now that I could tell you how to play Selfless Healer if you asked me, but I could definitely probably go into Eternal Flame rotation and
it's really hot.
Stat priority.
No, that's great. And then with Selfless Healer, like he said, in 10 mans, Eternal Flame is really the way to go unless you're doing Thok. Thok is by far the one where Selfless Healer trumps pretty much every other spec there. But sure, why don't you go through the stat priority? So I know there's a bunch of Holy Paladins watching as well. Why don't you go through the stat priority for Eternal Flame? based on the research you've done and based off your experience?
So the primary in a 10-man setting, what I would typically go for an
10-man
Eternal
setting,
Flame
key
build,
there.
would be mastery at a specific item level when I was able to hit the 3506 haste cap comfortably. The reasoning, well, I'll go into what I'm actually gemming for. In red slots, at my item level currently, I'm going for intellect mastery. For blue slots, I'm going spirit mastery, and for yellow slots, I'm going pure mastery gems. Just because at the item level I am, and for the progression I was doing at the time, it was not beneficial for me to go straight out mastery like some of the 581 or 580 Holy Paladins are doing at particular times. As the reasoning behind that is because you can Eternal Flame blanket the raid, which for people who don't know is basically blanking the raid Eternal Flames. But when you do cast Eternal Flame initially, it heals them as much as a Ward of Glory would be, and then puts a shield around them. So the more mastery you get, the bigger the shield is. So as an Eternal Flame Holy Paladin, my rotation would be Holy Radiance, or Holy Shock, Holy Radiance, Holy Radiance, Eternal Flame. If I got a Daybreak proc, maybe, and depending on what was going on in the fight, maybe I might try and cap my Holy Power if there was a lot of movement involved at the particular time, or I knew that I needed to bank Holy Power for a particular phase that was coming up. Then I may delay my Eternal Flame usage if I knew something was going to happen. But typically, I would be reforging away from crit and away from haste after I reach my haste breakpoint and going for straight mastery for the reason that I just explained.
Okay. And what item level were you sitting at when you mentioned those stats in that priority? And what progression level?
When I was doing normal mode, when we had cleared normal mode and we were starting heroic progression, I was between the item levels of 552 and 555. I did have 2 different trinkets, so if I switched one of them out, I would jump up a couple item levels for a fight. I am now at 560 because I picked up some heroic pieces while I was tanking.
Okay. And what spirit amount were you sitting at, if you remember?
I was usually sitting about around 12k with using an intellect flask.
That's really low.
I've been away from, like I said, away from Holy Pound a little bit more. I'm kind of forgetting how much people are typically going for. I know that one of my friends is running significantly less spirit now. I also have another friend that plays a Holy Pound and that's running 18k spirit because he is raiding a 25-man and going pure mastery and is spamming Holy Radiance the entire time. So at the time I was probably going around 12k, really tracking my mana and my Divine Plea usage so that I can maximize the amount of stats that I have on my... I don't want to waste mastery for spirit if I can comfortably heal a fight with as much mastery as I can get.
Yeah, that's a good point there. So, again, it's 10 men versus 25 men. In 25 mans, you may have multiple sources of mana regen. You might have those extra resto shamans or whatever. So you may be able to net less spirit. 12,000 spirit, I think, is really, really low for a Holy Paladin. Again, it also depends on how much haste you're running. If you're running, the 7170 haste cap, you're going to need more spirit to sustain that cast speed. You're getting more cast out in that same amount of time period. With me, I run the Heroic Warforged Siegecrafter Trinket, the Dysmorphic Samophalange of Discontinuity. I run 18,000 spirit, and I still sometimes may have spirit issues because I'm just non-stop Holy Radiance, Holy Shock, Eternal Flame, just going through that rotation non-stop with Holy Prism, and it's quite mana intensive. And he gave some good reasonings, his other friends are 18,000. One guy's a little bit less. It depends on the spec. It depends on what they're gearing and their progression level. It all depends. There's no clear-cut answer for why you should be, why you're gemmed a certain way. You just have to explain it, and he did pretty well there.
Oh, I also may add just really quickly, I do have the Siegecrafter trinket, and when I was playing Holy Paladin, I found that procced way more than I anticipated. So I would always have, my 12k would boost up to 32,000 spirit, and so I tried going a little lower at the time to see if it would work, and it did end up working out for me. Before I stopped playing Holy Paladin, I do distinctly remember saying, okay, I need to get a little bit more spirit in case this doesn't proc, or in case I need to, if the raid just drops suddenly, I don't want to have to just be worrying about the mana too much. So with that trinket, I think I was relying a little bit too much on it. So
okay, sounds good. Now, how comfortable are you going through World of Logs or Warcraft logs and going through parses? That's one question we typically ask.
For the most part, if I'm very comfortable with it. I would say that I can say that for a while I was logging for my raid, and as a raid leader, it's my job to go through logs and inspect, is this person doing the rotation correctly? If they're a DPS, are they using the right talents? Are they using the right spells? For a warlock, on Garrosh, normal mode, typically, your incinerate damage should probably be much higher than your chaos bolt damage in most situations, just because if you're firing brimstoning at the start, you're going to get way more incinerate damage and DPS out of that. Similarly, for healing logs, I have to go through as a raid leader and say, okay, is this disciplined priest using their abilities correctly, which I don't have much knowledge on, but I also go, okay, for myself, if I analyze myself, what percentage of my healing is absorbed healing, and what percentage of it is just raw healing that's going on in the players. And so for that reason, because I have to raid lead, I'm pretty comfortable going through them, and I would occasionally, pretty much after every raid for heroic progression, go into my own logs and my raids logs and just look and see if there's anything that's weird happening. Or if I notice during a specific fight, like I mentioned, my other hero is a Resto Druid. So on fights that were very heavy AoE based, he would just typically destroy me because he was also a much, much higher item level than I was. He was about 565 when we were going through heroic progression. So for AoE fights, he would typically do much better until I got more gear. The absorber started crushing him, but I'm fairly comfortable with that, and I do go through and analyze my logs and other people's logs to see if I'm doing everything correctly, and if something seems or feels wrong, I will go through other Holy Paladin's logs and see what doesn't match up, and then if I can figure it out on my own, then I'll change my playstyle or try out the playstyle, and if not, then I'll try and do some research to see what it is that I'm actually doing incorrectly.
So the answer to the question, are you comfortable with the World of Logs and Warcraft logs, was yes. Yes, you are.
Yeah, that was really long. Sorry.
No, that's fine though. But again, you went really in depth with your answer, and that last part was really, really good. Where you said, I'll look at World of Logs, I'll see what's working, what's not working. I'll research different play styles, and I'll just continue trying to improve myself. Which is that was the best part of the answer. And yeah, you go through logs and you'll analyze them, especially after progression, to see, what people can be doing or what they're not doing. And then again, there's that babysitting aspect of being a raid leader. Is this guy doing his rotation right? Well, partly as raid leaders, we need to be trusting these guys, trusting our raiders. Yes, they're not complete imbeciles. They're doing the rotations roughly right. But no, that was good. Again, it's a long answer. That's fine. Some interviews take, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Some interviews take an hour because of how thorough the person is. Like, we schedule half-hour blocks for interviews because we may have a number of interviews in a row. But if it's a long interview, that's fine too. But if they're super, super long-winded, had you said, yeah, I do Warcraft logs and, that stuff, and then you went on to tell me a story about this one time you were going about Warcraft logs, and you were trying to, find out who was doing their job and who wasn't there doing their job, and then you went off into a whole little tangent, that would be way too long of an answer. But your answer, again, was relevant. It was concise. It was relevant to that entire point, which was great. Okay, yeah, we're doing Tempest Keep, guys. For those of you on EU Alliance, Sparty 1780, if you guys want to do Tempest Keep with me. Okay. Tell me about a time where you really let the raid down, whether it be, a raid wiping mistake. Give me an example of one, and what you did to fix it for next time. That's a harder one.
All right, let me think for a second.
Sure.
Trying to think of something that was easily fixed. Okay, so
I'll tell you
on
about some
Heroic
animations in a while,
Mercius in 10-man, it's a little bit different than 25-man because you have to split 50 of the corruption among 10 players among usually like 6 DPS plus the tank, so around 8 people instead of 25 people or how many people you have hitting the boss. So you do have to watch your stacks very closely because the damage does grow exponentially as they gain. Obvious stuff. When we started progression in that fight, I was telling people that you should stop DPSing when you get around 4 stacks, which I had read somewhere, and that I had read it, and I had cross-referenced it, and it wasn't completely. There were a couple discrepancies between it of how many stacks you should actually stop DPSing to save the raid, and I had told people 4 stacks, which, because of our guild's experience and our healing ability, it was a little bit too much for everyone to handle in a new progression fight. So the quick fix to that is just tell people, well, stop DPSing at 3 stacks. However, that is fairly difficult to do if you have, number hungry, DPS in your raid that are just completely focused at their bars, which does happen occasionally. At which point we decided to try something new, which ended up working out, which was our tanks would, at the beginning of the fight, for 10-man, would load up on these stacks at the beginning, and I tried taking Clemency, and I would bop them off, and that kind of helped a little bit because it would take a bunch of the stacks off. It also did help that one of our tanks was a Paladin as well, so he was able to bubble them off and kind of get rid of that damage. So,
again,
we tried something. We ended up for farming kills, just telling people, okay, watch your stacks, because that's way too complicated to try and do every single time. But it was a kind of a quick fix to actually get the kill.
Okay. So in that answer, you mentioned, that it wasn't the best idea to be running with, 4 stacks is what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that, through research, you could have done more of. What I was looking for a little bit more was, how you really screwed the pooch, how you really screwed the raid over. And Shuttle gave a good example here. How did Shuttle wipe the raid really badly? If you guys remember Dragon Soul doing Yorsage with purple orbs, basically every heal that went out would give each person in that raid, whoever was healed, 1 debuff. And if you healed non-stop with AoE heals, which healed a majority of the raid, it would blow the entire raid up. So you could get 5 heals on a person, or 4 heals on a person, that 5th heal would blow up the entire raid. So as a healer, you have to be really careful of who you heal, and healing assignments were really, really critical on that fight. Shuttle blew the entire raid up, I'm assuming, and I'm guessing Rignaros rolled up a newspaper and beat him over the head with it, and he felt really bad for doing a stupid mistake like that he should know better about. So what would Shuttle have done next time to make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, he would have, made his debuffs maybe a little bit bigger. He would have put on his smart glasses or whatever. But everybody makes those kinds of really, really dumb mistakes. Yeah, you should know better. Gotta make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Let me get these guys invited to Darktel, Tampa. Which, oh shit, one sec, party's full. Given that we raid 3 or 4 days a week, you know, based off our progression, how many of those raids are you going to typically miss, or what is your attendance percentage, let's say in a 30-day raid schedule?
For my own personal guild, we raid 2 days a week, so my attendance is probably around upper 90s. I'd say 95 to, I can't say 100 because like emergencies happen. Obviously, real life hits you in the face sometimes, and you just can't do anything about it. My schedule is going to change drastically next year, so if I was applying to a guild that raids 3 times a week, I am going to be going to college next year. So at this moment in time, I have absolutely no clue whatsoever what my schedule is going to be like. Saying that,
That's honest.
I will have a lot of say over my schedule and over the classes that I'm taking, so I will be able to attempt and be there as much as I can, and I would shoot for 100% attendance as I do now in my current raiding guild, and if my attendance started to drop to a percentage that was hindering heroic progression or progression in general, at that point I would have no expectations of basically I would if one of my raiders started missing a lot, I would start finding a replacement for that person, but also I would give plenty of notification. I would not come one raid night and say, by the way, I can't raid tonight and I can't raid anymore. I would make sure that I would be there shooting for 100% attendance, but not entirely realistic, and if there were going to be conflicts that arose because of my schedule changing within the next 6 months, I would notify you immediately.
Fantastic. Sorry, my thing's bound to whatever. Yeah, that was good answer. So he's able to do 95% attendance, and if he was able, I mean, his schedule changed. So he says he's upfront right there. He's going to university, college, whatever next year. His schedule may change, but he'll have a lot of flexibility, or a lot of control with his schedule. He'll try to adjust it around raid times, which is really exceptional. And then if his schedule were to change, he's not going to just up and drop. He's going to give us fair warning that his schedule's changing and he can't raid, and for us to look for a replacement. And what that answer tells me is he's loyal and he's dedicated. He cares about what he does, and part of that is I know he's a raid leader. I know that he knows that it sucks to be missing players, and people are unreliable or whatever. People just disappear sometimes, and it sucks. And he doesn't want to be that person. He doesn't want to let He doesn't want to let the rest of his team or raid down by being that scumbag that just disappears cowardly in the middle of the night, because nobody wants that guy. And one of the hardest things to find in Warcraft or in any kind of setting like this is loyalty. So let's say even if his tech answers were not the best, even if he told me, Sparty, the first haste cap is 3576 or 3575, whatever he said, because he was a little mixed up there. And he was so certain about that, but he was wrong, like dead wrong. I wouldn't, deny him that. He's got a lot of other qualities right now that I'm really liking. Yeah, his answers are a little long-winded, which is fine. Better than, really crappy short answers and someone that may interview really poorly. I'd rather deal with potentially someone, that has longer answers and has a lot more passion for the game than somebody's like, if I asked him, what's your attendance like? And he says, it's totally fine. And that's all he told me. Or if I asked him, what's your attendance like in 100, 30-day period, and he says, I'll probably miss about half the raids. I've got other obligations. So why the fuck are you applying to a heroic raiding guild that requires 90% attendance, right? You're wasting everybody's time. But his answers, again, are pretty thorough. Okay.
Alert. You are marked for extermination.
Now tell me a little bit about how you feel about our loot system, so loot council system, compared to your previous loot system that you've used, let's say in the 10-man or in your previous guilds. Are you comfortable switching to that?
Right, bluntly, yes, I am more than excited to be switching to a loot council system. We, in my guild, have many times tried to switch to a loot council-esque type of loot system. We have had issues with it before because of attendance and having to pug a bunch of people, and because we're not a cutting-edge heroic raiding guild, pugs leave when you don't give them loot most of the time. If you're, just doing normal modes. So we do need for main spec, read for off spec, stuff like that. So I am absolutely okay with going to a loot council style of distribution.
Perfect. Other things I may cover. Let's say I'm pretty happy with this guy overall. I'm looking for more, World of Draenor. He mentioned a little bit that he's going to school. He's control his schedule. But how comfortable are you with any off specs right now? So do you have a protection or retribution off spec?
Yes. If I was, as a holy paladin, I do have a protection off spec. It's but like I said, protection is my main spec right now, so my protection spec is 566, but I always keep my holy set as up to date as I can. I'm at 560 right now. If I get a new piece, I try and gem and enchant, reforge as quickly as I can. Trying to keep up to date in case, there's nothing in Siege of Orgrimmar right now, but in case there's a definite one tank fight that I need to step out for, I will keep second spec ready, so that I could step in and heal if we need it at any time.
Awesome.
And on top of that, I do have a retribution. I've been working on a ret set. I did not come into the game with a ret set already, so I'm working on. I already have a weapon. I have some ret off pieces. I just don't have the spec because I am wholly off spec. So, but if need be, I do have experience playing ret. So it would be pretty easy to switch over.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, a couple comments there. So Priz says, one tip, don't say a lot of interviews. The reason people do say a lot of interviews is because it stops that awkward silence. Again, like I said it right there, it stops that awkward silence in between, and humans feel a lot more comfortable when there is something said in between rather than nothing said. So that's why people it's more of a comfort thing. It's an unconscious decision as well to do it. But yeah, it's definitely a habit. You can break out of it very easily. Sorry. Now I'm really paying attention to it. Screw you, Priz. Screw you, stupid Death Knight. What are some other typical questions? So I know Priz, Shuttle, a lot of you guys are in other heroic raiding guilds. What are some questions that you guys go through in your typical interviews? I'll go through a couple more, but type them out for us, and we'll give them to Slip Oz over here as well. Now tell me what you believe separates a good raider from a great raider or an exceptional raider.
From a raid leader standpoint, I have to deal with this a lot. Because we're a normal guild, we get a lot of people that want to raid and get loot. And I personally believe that a good raider is someone that will show up on time, first of all, will be prepared in every aspect possible, knowing the fights, having their own food. It is so annoying when someone asks, can I have a noodle cart, and we just put one down. Having flasks, having pots if needed, making sure that their gear is in order. That's a good player. Making sure that they are good to go in every sense of whatever we may ask of them. Making that, that's their responsibility as a raider. A great raider is someone that does that without being asked, as well as doing that little bit of extra thinking on their own to either benefit the raid either while we're raiding or outside of raiding. Making sure that if someone else may not be doing their job, basically assuming that everyone else around you may not be doing everything that you are to making yourself
That's
the best player
okay.
that you can be. And so maybe taking over, not taking over as in like a power trip, but taking maybe more responsibility because you know that you can handle it. On top of that, or in addition to that, a great raider is someone that can motivate themselves to be better, can
I
take
like that answer.
criticism. As a
That's a
raid
good
leader, a
one.
lot of times I'll tell people, hey, next time don't do it this way because, or next time when I say stack in Thok, I mean stack. I don't mean kind of shuffle to the left. Is someone that can take that criticism and then turn it into them becoming a lot better. And so a great raider is someone that can take criticism, can take uh, help as well, and make themselves a better player, but also are not going to be an ass about it. That aren't going to rub it in your face that I'm top DPS. That are going to be trying to find the right word. That are trying to be uh, genuine about their playing ability, and really that strive to be the best player that they can be, and not just settle. Never settle. So.
Yeah, okay. That's good. Yeah, there's a couple of really good ones in there. Some of that were okay, I thought, but there's a couple of really good ones where you mentioned they're striving to be better, and they're taking that criticism and understanding that stack means stack. Stack doesn't mean loose clump that you can see your fat panda ass or your fat boomkin ass, but stack means stacking tight like a boy's anus. You just gotta be in so close. Like if you guys ever did heroic lich king, you needed a tight stack there for the Valkyrs or for the Defile. You needed a very very tight stack because for every yard that you were off, you made the fight that much more difficult for everybody else.
Can you tell my
Now, if
raiders
you're
that, please?
you must stack. Like, why do I put a marker there? Can you see the marker? Yes. And we share the same frustrations. People not stacking that. So you understand. And raid leaders make some of the best members because they know exactly what's expected of them. If you were to ask me that question, what is the difference between a good raider and a great raider? Yeah, I mean, good raider is okay. I mean, yes, the whole food, flask stuff. That shit it's just really annoying because it's a disrespect to people's time. We have to drop a noodle cart for you to eat because you were too busy picking your nose last attempt, and now we've wasted 30 seconds. 10 people go through that, that's 5 minutes of raid time wasted. Or, you do that a bunch of times through the entire 3-hour raid night, that's 5 minutes, or, bathroom breaks being too long, that's 10 minutes wasted, and that could have been another attempt, another progression pull. With that answer, what is the difference between a good raider and a great raider? I always tell you guys here on stream that a good raider will make a mistake, they'll own up to it, and they'll make sure it doesn't happen again. A great raider will see somebody else make a mistake, realize what they did, and then also not repeat it. So they don't make the mistake themselves, they learn from other people's mistakes. And yeah, taking that criticism in stride and listen to your raid leaders, those are all fantastic things. But yeah, that constant improvement, that research, it's all being part of a competitive gamer, competitive player. So whether you play sports or whether you play, just gaming or whatever, you need to have that competitive drive to be the best. You go into a raid night, I'm going to be the best goddamn, warlock, paladin, whatever class you are in that raid. Let me see what other questions people had. Do you speak... Nah, I don't care about speaking French. Oh, and yeah, the other part of the answer, what makes a great raider? Well, you know what everybody else is doing. So a great example of that fight is back in Sunwell when we were doing Kill Jaden. If you knew where everybody else was positioned and you knew what their job was during a fight, you could do yours a lot better. And you really have to rely on your raiders to know their shit. Because if you can't, you gotta replace them or train them to become better.
If I can just jump in real quick, Heels Beef, who just posted that long thing about that in that tiny paragraph, talking about more the like basically what you just said is like I have a pretty strong philosophy that with my raiders that if I can go on the internet and within 5 minutes find a forum about your class and I can meet and or beat you in DPS, that you're not trying hard enough. And that just goes into playing like you should know everything about your class, but also being able to, as a raid leader, I need to know mostly how a class works generally. I won't go into depth, but I'm sure you understand. Like how most of the classes work, but if I asked you to explain how do you play an arms warrior in depth, not everyone knows that, but being able to know, how other classes work in conjunction with others. Why is it not a good idea to bring 5 warriors as DPS to a raid and a 10-man, stuff like that.
Yeah, those are some very basic things to do. Shuttle, no, I'm curious what Shuttle thinks. His definition of a great raider compared to a good raider compared, with the rest of us. Again, I tailor my stream more towards the the heroic raider types, not the top raiders, the Blood Legion, the methods. But I'm curious, where Blood Legion, thinks what's a great raider and what's a good raider, because our definitions definitely do differ, and my definition is definitely geared towards more that somebody is top 50, top 100 US, top 200 US, whatever. And yeah, I mean Ulf's right with the racist question. I don't care what friggin' race color people are. I don't even know what race half of my raiders are. Like I honestly don't know, don't care. Are you a good player? Are you a good person? That's all that really matters. Are you loyal? Can I trust you? That's it.
Also, while Shuttle defines what a great raider is, I guess part of my answer, defining, between a good and great raider is like, if I have to explain to my raiders what I expect of them to be a great raider as a whole, it's different from my end because again, we haven't, we're clearing normal every week and then trying to do a little bit of heroic progression now. So the expectations are still high, but they're certainly not as high as someone like Shuttle who goes from WWA to Blood Legion in a week. So
yeah, whatever. I don't even remember what I said, so my head is all fogged up. We can do one quick run here. Let's do. Okay, we're gonna do one next here really quick again. Okay, let me give you a couple more questions that we'll typically go through an interview, and then we'll sort of wind it down.
All right.
Let me just start out of here. And we'll do a couple more Alliance Transmog runs for you guys. I'm trying to think, what have I not covered with both Noise Marine and the other one? I'm trying to think. Okay, here's one for you as a raid leader, because this applies to, what kind of things motivate you best and how you motivate people. So on a fight that, you've wiped terribly, let's say it's a farm fight, and your guild has done really, really terribly that night, you haven't been able to re-clear it for whatever reason, or you've regressed on progression. Morale is really low. What do you do personally to get your own motivation back up? How do you dust off that night, and how do you motivate your other players?
All right, so I'll start with answering like the personal
Okay.
like side of this question. There was one night where we were trying to kill normal
Onyx and Nyx,
paragons
guys.
with a couple of alts, and the amber came out, and we like couldn't kill it to save our lives. and it wasn't anything other than DPS not paying attention. We spent, I think, like 2 hours, and then raid time was up and people had to leave, so we called it for the night. And I went back and I looked at logs to see what people were doing, and I looked at what was that. I looked and paid attention to what was actually being said by myself, what was also going on in the raid. And to boost, I realized that I was being quite negative towards the raiders. I wasn't yelling, but I was ticked off to say that, we'd killed it like 20 times or so. We can't do this now. So I realized that, and I didn't talk to myself like a crazy person, but I said to myself, okay, we've killed this 20 times now. We have not been able to kill it tonight for whatever reason, and what can I do better as a raid leader to come back and
That's a great answer.
get this boss down? So I guess to motivate myself, I critique myself. What could I have done better? And then I realize, oh, well, if I do that next time, the raid will go a lot smoother as a whole. If I'm fuming at the end of a raid and I don't want to talk to people, which, I don't ever, try never to yell over mumble, which is what we use, just because I think that yelling is not usually the best solution, especially in normal mode guild.
Yep, he's absolutely right there.
I will just log off of the game, I'll play some Hearthstone, I'll calm down, and then I will go and talk with my other officers, talk about the strategy that we're using. I will watch videos, even if they're not from a Holy Paladin perspective, to try and pump myself up for the next night, and basically try and, just start over. Yes, we wiped 20 times to this last night. It's a fresh night tonight, let's not have the same problem, etc., etc., etc.
Very good.
On a non-personal level, if we're wiping, I'll use the same example again, Paragons over and over again, if we cannot kill it, something that's worked in the past for me, because we're not trying to, get realm first and world first and stuff like that, sometimes just because people, if we're struggling on the boss progression, whatever it is, if people haven't killed a boss in a while, they forget what that feels like. There was one time where we actually went back and killed a couple bosses in heroic TOT, and then came back to Siege of Orgrimmar and just annihilated the boss that we've been struggling on for weeks, because people had forgotten the feeling of killing a boss in so long, and for whatever reason, I can't explain this psychology behind it, but it worked, and people just we just started plowing through the bosses. So, sorry for the in-depth answer again, but it helps me to explain things with examples.
No, that's good. And you touched on a couple of really good things. How to motivate yourself, which is, I do the same thing. I'll rewatch some videos, I'll look at some kills. With me, though, it's very, very easy for me to turn off my raid leader hat as soon as the raid is done. As soon as the raid is done for me, Serenity now, the raid didn't happen, I'm no longer angry, and it's a switch like that. And you guys see the difference between raid leader Sparty and, the guild leader Sparty, or the Sparty that you guys see and hang out with normally. There's a much, it's a huge difference. And then you touched on a couple things where, you can't be negative as a raid leader, and that's one of my big faults too, that I've been trying to change for the longest time, that, the guild and the raid will really pick up on everything you say, so be careful what you say and how you say it. You can't be that negative person, because you being a negative Nancy will not help your raid team. There's a time and place for yelling. It's definitely not in most normal guilds. It should be used, very, very sparingly. If something needs to be done right away, or people need to get their shit together, fine. But definitely, you should be giving feedback constructively. You should be, speaking to the rest of your raiders with respect, because they're people. That's the bottom line. Behind that screen, it's not just some random pleb that you're talking to, that you're raiding with. It's a friend, They're your friends. They're your, your guild family. And yeah, a raid setting, you're there to get shit done, and, there's time and place for fun, but you treat everybody with respect, and that's the biggest thing. I love all my guild members, and we're all teammates, and we all make mistakes, right? But sometimes you got to put the foot down. Sometimes you got to give him the carrot. Let me re-invite these guys. One sec. Dax Talks, Anonymous, Relomo. Okay. Yeah, we have a command for that. There we go. Thanks, Ganor. Thanks a lot. We have that command just covered. And at this point, I mean, we normally go through, administrative questions as well. How soon can you transfer? And we covered a lot of the other questions with Noise Marine. And now a really good one for the end is, do you have any questions for me or to the guild? Anything specific you'd like to know about us? Or anything you'd like to have clarified?
Yeah, I actually do. A question, as a person being interviewed as an applicant, as the GM, how do you handle?
That's a good one coming.
I don't like using drama as a word because I think it invokes some way more negative, vibes than it should. But
That's gonna be a long answer too.
If drama does occur in a guild, whether it be over something that was said in guild chat or whatnot, how would you go about handling something that upsets a majority of the raid base, not necessarily the guild base, but the raid base?
It's a really good question, and I'm going to give you a couple answers to that one, a couple of examples of drama and how it's been handled. Really, in raid settings, you have zero room for drama. You can't waste time on that shit, but it's going to happen. Things will happen. We're all family here, and if I said, do you argue with your brothers, sisters, your friends, you're going to say, yes, you do. That shit happens all the time. But do you still stay friends afterwards? Yeah, of course. But people disagree. There will never be something that everybody agrees on all the time. I can't please everybody, but at the same time, I'm never going to stop trying to please everybody. You come to the realization that, yes, you will make everybody happy, but you'll definitely try your hardest as a guild leader, as a raid leader, whatever. A couple examples of drama. I am no nonsense, no bullshit. I don't care how long you've been in the guild. Let me try to think here. A couple examples. One time back in Molten Core, this was about 9 years ago, a bunch of guys, weren't happy with how I was leading the raid, and it was like a much more rigorous kind of era of Sparty back then. And they weren't happy with raid time or loot or whatever other random shit they were complaining about, which doesn't matter. So they said, hey, there's 5 of us or whatever. One guy was speaking for all of them. There's 5 of us, and if these things don't fix, we're going to leave the guild. So I said, okay, goodbye, leave. That's it. Done. You have issues. You want to give me ultimatums. You don't want to talk through things. You don't want to, give me your issues, and you have issues. Things have to change. That's it. There's no suggestions for you. Well, that's fine. I can find somebody else to replace you with. Fine. Another example of drama that we had, and this is, you always want to prevent drama. I've told this story on stream a couple times. We have one girl that is a raider. She's a new applicant, and this is why some guilds don't recruit women into their guilds or girls. She is a ex-gymnast. So she's pretty flexible. She assembles rifles for a living, and she lives close to a bunch of raiders, and she's one of these, so I'm sure you guys can see where this is going. So one day, this is probably about 3 weeks into her app period, I get a message from one of my raiders' girlfriends, and they say, hey, this chick is sending, nude pictures of herself to my boyfriend or fiance or whatever it was. Like, oh, that's a wild accusation. That's definitely a no-no. We don't interfere with people's personal lives. Bottom line, you don't. So I asked her, do you have any proof of this? Can you, I don't want to see these pictures, but can you show me a proof of the email being sent? I just need, because it's a huge accusation. And yeah, she showed me the email of the girl sending it. I verified the email addresses. I really doubt it was photoshopped. so yeah, she showed me the email and part of the picture that was sent. I'm like, okay, that's it, done. I don't need to see any more. I don't even need to talk to the girl because that kind of shit is unacceptable, and quickly removed her. That's it. End of drama. But I mean, in any kind of drama situations, you definitely want to minimize it. When you want to prevent things from happening, you, as a guild leader, you gauge how happy your guild members are, right? There's a couple secrets that I have to sort of keeping people happy. One of them is having those sand officers, people that are really great with people. I mean, I don't care if they're programmers. If they're really good with people and talking to people and have good, have great integrity, good values, then they'll be good potential officers. We're gonna mark that here. But I mean, with handling drama, you can't let it happen. If it does happen, I put my fist down right away and end it. If people have issues, we talk about those issues. If there's a disagreement between players, fine, disagree, but can we find a compromise somewhere? I don't know if you have any specific, I know it's a really long answer coming from me, but if you had a specific example of drama and how I would handle it.
Your soup's gonna get cold.
I know.
Yeah, so this is more of due to it's not like drama that seeps outside of the game, but we occasionally you get players in your guild that are tattletales of this person's not doing this DPS they're supposed to be doing, or did you see this person, they keep dying to this mechanic even though it's their first time killing the boss and stuff like that. And we got into a situation a while ago, won't mention names whatsoever, where we had a raider who was a tattletale and constantly berating not just me but all the other officers. This person isn't doing the DPS that they want to do, and he actually started whispering the raider that was in question, basically the raider that was not performing at the highest level. And as a raid leader, when someone's not performing at the highest level that either they're usually perform at or that they could be performing at. And this started a whole slew of comments in raid and guild, and ultimately we decided that night was going very poorly. We had a lot of pugs in the group. We actually called raid because I cannot explain to you enough how hectic raid chat was becoming in a time period of 30 minutes. And
because this one person was, okay. So yeah, just let me interrupt you before I forget what you said. Number one, it's really the raid leader's place to be commenting on things. That person, that member, was out of place, in my opinion, sending whispers to everybody else, because that throws them off their game. If this person, has feedback, fine. That's totally fine. I don't really care about tattletales, that kind of stuff. It's more of an issue when they're sending you whispers. Did you see that guy? He died again? Well, that's fine. We see this. We're not blind. We see them dying. Let us handle it. And if they have suggestions, the best time to usually do it is after the raid, not during a raid. You don't want to bring your baggage to the raid. Do it, talk to the GMs, the officers afterwards.
Yeah, and the end part of this question is, we ended up, we didn't kick him from the guild, we didn't kick him from the raid at that point, just because in our current state we could not afford to lose a player. Yep. We did talk to him about it and basically said, you can't do this anymore. Let us worry about it. And at that point, he decided to leave the guild and join a higher progress guild. And okay, yeah, just wondering, if there's any better way to handle that. Or is that good?
No, I mean, as the raid leader, as GM, I just would have told him, to shut the fuck up, and we'll deal with it afterwards. Not maybe in so few words, but that you're aware and you're handling it, and that's it, and you're going through logs. If they have feedback, they can give you suggestions, fine, but they should not be the driving force, because you don't want them to have that beacon of negativity. But yeah, if that was happening in my guild, and let's say Ganner was being a negative little Nancy, he recently got full member, and he's bitching about all the other apps that are dying. Well, Ganner, remember, you were an app at some point too. You were also making those mistakes. We didn't have a tattletale constantly bitching at you. It was me bitching at you because I'm the raid leader. and that's it. And you know, I'm the one that should be doing it. It shouldn't be 10 people. You don't want the raid leader and the class officer and this other random guy that is doing that high DPS whispering one person, because it's overwhelming, and especially if they're an applicant or new to the guild, it doesn't give them a great picture of what the guild's supposed to be like. And I'm sure as a raid leader and as an officer, you don't want your guild being shown that way.
Yeah.
And here's another really good one. And this one gets asked by someone, and this is from Fatsuno. What's the best way to handle something like that? You see someone underperforming or making a lot of mistakes. How do you point it out to them without sounding like a douche? I mean... Oh, sure. You can answer that one, then I'll answer it. And we'll wind this down.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go. Sorry. No, just because.
No, go ahead. I'm gonna eat my soup.
If you want to go first.
No, you go first.
Okay. Well, if I were to handle it, depends on if it's. For me, it depends on what they're actually playing, what they're underperforming at. If it's a class I'm very familiar with, either because I've rated on the past, usually I'll feel comfortable enough to, if they're willing to accept help from me, then I will try and help them right then and there. If they're not willing to accept help from me, at that time, I may try and provide, something that I could have come across on the internet after searching for 5 minutes, and try and help them out. If it's terrible DPS or healing, I would usually whisper them and say, hey, can you stick around after raid? I just need to talk to you. And afterwards, I would say, look, this needs to improve because X, Y, and Z is happening in direct correlation to your underperformance, and that if you need help, we have healing officers and DPS officers there to help you. And if not, then we may have to find someone that can actually do your job correctly. But that's also coming from a perspective of I can't afford to lose many players because I can't, we're not recruiting, 10 players a day or 50 players a day or however many apps, a very high heroic level guild gets, so.
Okay, yeah, and you brought up a couple of really good points there with, how you talk to people, giving them different avenues, but again, it's which kind of, really like what kind of rank guild you are. A guild that is, top 5 will do things differently than a guild that is top 50 or top 500. And it all sort of speaks back to, what you're familiar with and what you know and what you expect of your raiders. If it was me and somebody's underperforming, within reason, let's say, here, I'm going to give this example again on Ganor. Let's say we're doing Heroic Siegecrafter, and for those of you that don't know, we do Heroic Siegecrafter with 4 hunters. We look at weapons not dying for some reason. I would go through logs, and I would see, Ganor, you're doing, 20% less damage than all the other hunters. What the fuck is up? Figure it out. I mean, you're a big boy, you've got your big boy pants on. I'm not going to babysit Ganor and say, hey, are you using all these things correctly? Like, I have other things to do. It's a 25-man guild. I'm sorting through a lot of other shit right now, rather than be babysitting Ganor and what he's doing right or wrong, whether he's got aspect on or the right pets or the wrong pets or whatever. And it turned out he had the wrong pet out for the weapons when he was doing them on the assembly line, and that's what it came down to. And he found that out afterwards or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of really good ones too. Like, you talk to them after the raid, hey, this stuff has got to get fixed. And that's things you would say after the raid. During the raid, I need this fixed right now. I need you to figure out what you're doing. Go through logs really quick here. Let's take a 5-minute break and figure it out. Because I would expect my guys to, they all know how to go through logs. They know how to talk to the other hunters or the other paladins or rogues or whatever and see what they're doing differently. So, if you're a rogue that's doing a little bit less damage, see exactly what the other rogues are doing. Breakdowns in terms of what attacks, where they're standing, what interrupts they're doing, everything. You really need to know it. You feel picked on. Did you have any other questions? Let's say from me or in general?
Yeah, this is not directly, obviously this is like a mock interview, so
Yep.
was there anything besides the obvious saying a crap ton for like
That doesn't bother
you know,
me. No.
is there anything that you wanted to point out? Well, I'm just saying, you know, is there anything else that you would like to point out that I may could have done better? No, like obviously I talk a lot, but just that you could point out, just either for the stream or just for myself in general.
I thought it was a really
Basically, proof.
So can I ask how old you are?
17.
Yeah, you interview as if you were 25 or older, as a very mature raider, which speaks a lot to you. And we sort of picked that up because I heard you were going to university or college, and like, yeah, this guy's really young, but he speaks as if he was really mature and knew his shit, and he's 17, raid leader, officer, heroic raiding guild, all that stuff. You see all these guilds, and this is to those of you guys that bitch about this all the time. This guy, 17, leading his own guild, he's doing really well, he's mature, he knows how to speak to people, and some guilds won't let you in unless you're 18. Really? I'd take this guy in my guild any day over some douchebag that is 25 that is spamming anal jokes in trade chat. Because this guy, he knows his stuff, he knows what's expected of his players, and, he's going to be a loyal person. Yeah, so I thought it was a great interview overall. Again, personal feedback, I thought some of the answers were a little long-winded, and that's it. Yes, my dear?